On a desolate road, winding through the wilderness, Marcus drove his car toward an old diner perched on the roadside, unaware that a confrontation was about to unfold. Stepping inside, he entered a quiet space where all eyes turned toward him, silently awaiting some kind of reaction. In the corner of the diner, a group of bikers began to mock him. But Marcus, the man with an unassuming appearance, paid them no mind. He simply sat down at a table and continued with his meal. The atmosphere grew tense as the taunts kept coming. The bikers, relentless in their jeering, didn't realize they were about to learn a valuable lesson. Through quiet patience and strength that didn't need to be shown, Marcus would soon teach them that true power lies not in confrontation, but in control of oneself. Marcus parked his car in front of the old diner by the side of the road, a place where time seemed to have come to a standstill. The small, humble diner had frosted windows and a sign worn down by years of sun and rain. As he stepped inside, a quiet stillness enveloped the space. The old tables and chairs were scattered around, with a jukebox standing silently in the corner. There was no sound. The atmosphere was thick, as if everything inside the diner was waiting for something to happen. Marcus entered, and the doorbell rang. Immediately, all eyes were on him, as if he were an alien in an unfamiliar world. The patrons of the diner offered no smiles, no greetings. Their gazes were sharp, scrutinizing, filled with suspicion. The only empty table near the window was where Marcus chose to sit. He didn't say a word, quietly removing his cap and placing it on the table, then opening his wallet to pull out some money. In the corner of the diner sat a group of bikers dressed in black leather, their jackets adorned with tattoos. They stared at Marcus, their looks unmistakably full of contempt. The largest biker, with tattoos covering his arms, was the first to speak. "Strange? A traveler? Probably just passing through," he sneered, his eyes narrowing as he stared at Marcus. Marcus didn't respond. He simply lowered his gaze to the menu. Another biker, with long hair and a scruffy beard, continued the mockery. "You sure you're in the right place? This place isn't for people like you." Vulgar and racist remarks flowed freely into the heavy silence of the diner. Marcus remained still. The taunts didn't seem to bother him. With a calm gesture, he ordered a burger, fries, and a black coffee, then continued studying the menu as though nothing was happening. But the group of bikers wasn't going to let it go so easily. The more Marcus remained silent, the more uneasy the bikers became. They began to wonder about this man. If he wasn't responding, there had to be a reason. The silence in the diner stretched on, making the group of bikers increasingly uneasy. What had started as staring turned into open mockery, as they hoped to provoke some reaction from Marcus. But he remained silent, offering no response, no glance in their direction, simply sipping his black coffee, as though he were in some distant place, utterly indifferent to the world around him. Unable to bear it any longer, Kyle, the largest of the bikers, stood up. He walked toward Marcus with a steady, confident stride, as if preparing to crush his prey. When he reached Marcus's table, Kyle grinned maliciously and said, "You probably don't know, but this isn't a place for people like you. You'd better leave before things get ugly." Marcus didn't look up. "I'm just here for a meal," he replied calmly. His words seemed to slide off Kyle like water off a duck's back. He didn't like the way Marcus was ignoring him. That calmness stirred something in Kyle, a sense of being disrespected. And so, he pressed on. "I don't think you heard me." Kyle's voice grew harsher as he sat down opposite Marcus, his face nearly touching his. "You don't belong here. You don't deserve to sit here." He repeated it, this time with an undercurrent of threat in his tone. Everyone in the diner was listening now. The place felt frozen, yet the air was so tense it was almost suffocating. Patrons shifted in their seats, some quietly slipping away from their tables, while others whispered among themselves, too afraid to draw attention. Marcus finally lifted his gaze slightly, his eyes cold as they locked onto Kyle's. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to have lunch," he said, his tone as steady as ever, unaffected in the slightest. Kyle couldn't take it anymore. He stood up, knocking his chair aside with a violent motion that sent it crashing against the wall. "So what do you think you're going to do?" he snarled, his fists clenched. "Don't make me teach you a lesson in respect." The other bikers began to stand as well, their excitement palpable, as if they were all waiting for a real fight to break out. Stealthy glances and nods passed between them, signaling that this was their moment to show Marcus just who was in charge. One of the bikers, with dark skin and long hair, flashed Marcus a taunting grin. "See? Stop pretending to be calm." "Now you'll learn what respect really means." Marcus gently set his coffee cup down on the table, unhurried, showing no sign of fear. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath, all eyes now fixed on the man they still couldn't quite understand, waiting for his next move. Marcus showed no sign of fear or confusion. The taunts from the bikers had long ceased to capture his attention. Everything seemed to slow down in his mind. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, no need for haste or outward displays of anger. He simply focused on what was about to unfold, not allowing Kyle's words, or those of anyone else in the group, to affect him. Kyle, standing just a step away from Marcus, began to feel the unsettling weight of Marcus's calm. It was as though everything around him had become still. No sound, except the mocking glances from those watching. The biker group now waited for a reaction, any action that would confirm their belief that they were right in challenging Marcus. But Marcus remained motionless, unable to tolerate the silence any longer. Kyle lunged forward, throwing a powerful punch at Marcus's face. Despite the strength of the blow, Marcus simply tilted his head, letting the punch glide harmlessly past him. The entire diner watched, but no one had time to process what was happening. In a flash, Marcus grabbed Kyle's arm, tightening his grip until it felt like the biker's hand was trapped in a vice. Kyle couldn't break free, no matter how hard he tried to yank away. He twisted and wrenched his arm, but it was futile. Marcus said nothing, only holding him firmly, a presence as unyielding as a giant hand closing around him with no escape. "You don't want to do this?" Marcus said, his voice still calm, yet undeniably authoritative. Kyle grimaced, but there was nothing more he could do. A second later, Marcus gave a slight push, sending Kyle stumbling off balance and crashing onto a table. The group of bikers stood up immediately, their faces now filled with rage and frustration. They couldn't believe that someone like Marcus, who wasn't larger than them, wasn't stronger than them, had managed to knock down Kyle, the strongest among them, in the blink of an eye. Travis, the largest and most muscular of the group, charged forward, determined to settle the matter. He swung his fist at Marcus, hoping to get his attention and put him in his place. But Marcus, once again, didn't rush. He moved with swift precision, as if every move had been rehearsed. Marcus sidestepped Travis's punch, then quickly kicked his leg out, making Travis lose his balance and crash to the ground. Before Travis could rise, Marcus reached out and grabbed his wrist, pulling him towards him. Travis found himself staring into Marcus's eyes, but instead of fear, he saw nothing but calm and resolve. "You want to keep going?" Marcus asked, his voice as steady as when he had ordered his meal. The remaining bikers stepped back, their confidence beginning to waver. They no longer knew who they were facing. Marcus's seemingly simple blows made them feel as if they were being defeated in an instant. Slowly they realized they weren't confronting an ordinary man. Marcus knew how to fight, but he didn't need to show his strength. He knew when to act and when not to. Another biker, with long hair and a face covered in tattoos, charged at Marcus, holding a chair. He intended to use it as a weapon, but Marcus simply sidestepped, letting the chair fly past him. As the biker turned to face him, Marcus was already there, blocking him with a quick, decisive movement. He shoved the biker into a nearby table, sending him crashing down with a loud thud. From the 3 bikers who had already been taken down, only 2 remained standing, but they no longer held the confidence they had before. They exchanged uncertain glances, doubt creeping into their expressions. Marcus still stood motionless, his gaze unwavering. But now, the biker's confidence had completely vanished. Anyone could see that this battle wasn't just a physical fight. It was a clash between calmness and brute force. Marcus didn't need to exert strength. He only needed to use his intellect, his skill, and most importantly, to never let his emotions control him. As the battle came to an end, the atmosphere in the diner became eerily still. The bikers lay scattered across the room, their faces bruised, their backs and legs aching from Marcus's lightning-fast strikes. The group no longer held the confident, arrogant stance they once had. Instead, there was only embarrassment and worry. The other patrons, both the staff and the quietly seated customers, now stood in awe, their gazes filled with respect and surprise. Marcus stood in the center of the diner, showing no signs of fatigue. He simply stood tall, glancing over at the biker group one last time. Despite the chaos around him, he maintained an unusual calm, as if unaffected by the upheaval. He took a deep breath, then bent down to pick up his cap, placing it back on his head, and continued eating his meal as though nothing had happened. Travis, who had been knocked down earlier, lay sprawled on the floor, struggling to sit up. Grimacing, he lowered his head, and with a tired voice weakly asked, Who are you?" The question wasn't just curiosity, it was helplessness. He couldn't understand how Marcus had so effortlessly defeated them without breaking a sweat. Marcus looked at him steadily. He didn't respond right away. Every second seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, he simply said, "I'm the guy having lunch here. Nothing special." His simple answer, devoid of pride or boastfulness, left Travis and the biker group stunned. They were accustomed to meeting people who flaunted their victories, but Marcus was an exception. He didn't need to flaunt his strength. His calmness, in both speech and action, made them rethink everything. The diner, once lively and noisy, had now fallen silent. It was as if everyone had awoken from a long dream. The customers no longer looked fearful or confused, but instead they felt a quiet respect. They had witnessed a man who didn't win through brute strength, but through emotional control and superior intellect. Marcus returned to his table, picked up a piece of fries, took a small bite, and resumed eating as if nothing important had occurred. An older customer in the corner of the diner, with sun-kissed skin and calloused hands, sighed and said, "I've never seen anyone like him in my life." His words weren't just praise, but an acknowledgement that Marcus, through his calmness, had done something very few could ever accomplish. At that moment, the server, still standing behind the counter with her phone in hand, had yet to dial the police. She couldn't quite believe what had just happened. When Marcus looked up at her, she hesitantly asked, "Are you okay?" Marcus gave her a rare, gentle smile, full of kindness. "I'm fine, thank you. It's all over now." There was no arrogance, just a simple thank you. Everyone in the diner now shared the same feeling, a sense of relief, as if something had been set right. They were silent, but their eyes no longer held doubt or fear. Instead, there was a newfound respect for Marcus. The bikers, lying on the floor, could do nothing but glance at each other, their looks hesitant, acknowledging their defeat. They said nothing, only lowering their heads, but in their hearts, they had learned a valuable lesson. Sometimes, strength doesn't come from muscles, but from calmness and self-control. When Marcus stood up and walked out of the diner, no one tried to stop him. The chairs that the bikers had knocked over still lay scattered across the floor, but no one dared to stand up and clean them. The doorbell rang as Marcus passed through the door, and once again, the air in the diner seemed to settle into a heavy stillness. One of the bikers, the first to be knocked down, watched Marcus as he walked out the door. He didn't say a word, but in his eyes there was a shift. No longer was there contempt, only respect. Though they didn't know who Marcus was, they were certain they had encountered a man who couldn't be defeated by violence, but by intellect and serenity. The diner gradually returned to its usual pace, but what had just transpired would never fade from the minds of those who were there. Marcus had left without a word, without any special gesture, leaving behind only the eerie silence of a man who needed nothing to prove. The story of the quiet man would quickly spread throughout the small town, and those who had witnessed it would recount what they had seen. A man sitting down for lunch, yet capable of taking down an entire gang of bikers in the blink of an eye. The bikers lay sprawled on the floor, bruised and humiliated, unable to forget what had just occurred. The physical pain would heal, but the shame and sense of defeat would linger with them forever. One of the bikers, Travis, unable to come to terms with the loss, continued to think about Marcus for days afterward. He couldn't forget the calm, fearless look in Marcus's eyes. As for Marcus, he didn't care about how the story would unfold. He knew his actions had conveyed a message far more powerful than any words could. True strength wasn't about defeating an enemy or showing off power. It was about maintaining calm in every situation, facing challenges without letting emotions take control. On the quiet road, Marcus drove away, leaving no farewells, no trace behind. But for those in the diner, his story would live on. The silence he left would become the greatest lesson they could ever learn in their lives. Sometimes, we don't need to show our strength to earn respect. Marcus's story is proof that calmness can triumph over violence. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where staying calm helped you overcome a challenge? Share your story, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more valuable lessons like this one.